person who needs the least attention often has the strongest mind in the room, but society will never tell you that, because we live in a world that worships noise. The loudest voice gets noticed. The most outgoing person gets rewarded. The most socially active person looks the most successful. So when someone is quiet, when someone doesn't overshare, when someone doesn't chase validation, they get labeled shy, awkward, antisocial, cold. But here's the harsh truth people don't want to hear. Most people aren't uncomfortable with introverts. They're uncomfortable with people who don't need them. Self-sufficient introverts don't beg for approval. They don't panic when alone. They don't feel the urge to constantly prove themselves. And that triggers something deep in others, because most people are emotionally dependent on reaction. They need replies. They need attention. They need reassurance. They need to feel seen. But when someone stands calmly in their own space, not chasing, not competing, not performing, it feels threatening. And the ego doesn't like what it can control. So today we're breaking down something most people misunderstand: the psychology of the self-sufficient introvert, why they don't operate like everyone else, why their silence carries weight, why they are often underestimated, and why their independence makes others uncomfortable. If you've ever felt different, if you've ever preferred depth over noise, if you've ever been told you're too quiet, this isn't weakness, it's wiring, and once you understand it, you'll see yourself differently. Psychologists call this internal validation orientation. And once you understand it, you'll see why you act the way you do. Most people are externally validated. Their mood depends on who texted them, who noticed them, who complimented them, who approved of them. Their self-worth fluctuates based on reaction. But self-sufficient introverts, they are internally validated. Their emotional state doesn't swing wildly with social feedback. They process internally, they reflect privately, they regulate themselves, and that's where the conflict begins. Because society is built for externalizers, networking, constant collaboration, public performance, endless social interaction. But introverts recharge alone, not because they hate people, but because their nervous system processes stimulation deeply. Research on introversion shows introverts have higher cortical arousal, meaning their brains respond more intensely to external stimuli. Translation: too much social interaction feels overwhelming, too much noise feels draining, too much attention feels exhausting, so they retreat, not to avoid the world, but to rebalance. Here's the problem. The world interprets withdrawal as rejection. If you don't constantly engage, people assume you don't care. If you don't overshare, people assume you're hiding something. If you don't seek approval, people assume you lack confidence. But self-sufficient introverts don't operate on social dependency. They operate on meaning. They would rather have one deep conversation than 10 shallow ones. They would rather think before speaking. They would rather observe before reacting. And that patience, that restraint, that emotional independence, it looks unusual in a world addicted to stimulation. Your relationships, your habits, even your confidence, all of it is influenced by this one psychological pattern. If you are internally validated, you don't chase. If you are externally validated, you depend. And dependence creates vulnerability. Which brings us to something most people don't see coming. But here's where it gets even worse. Most people stop at "I'm just introverted," and that's the biggest mistake. Because self-sufficiency can either be your strength or your prison. Here's the painful part. People don't distance themselves from you because you're quiet. They distance themselves because they can't read you, and humans fear what they can't read. Psychology says uncertainty increases anxiety. When someone is emotionally expressive, we feel safe. When someone is contained, calm, unreadable, it creates tension. And tension makes insecure people uncomfortable. So sometimes self-sufficient introverts aren't excluded because they lack value. They're excluded because they don't broadcast it. And in a loud world, silent value gets overlooked. But here's the part nobody wants to admit. Some introverts use self-sufficiency as armor. And this next part explains why your life hasn't changed yet. This happens because your brain prioritizes safety over exposure. Your brain does this to protect you from rejection. If you don't need anyone, you can't be hurt. If you don't open up, you can't be betrayed. If you don't depend, you can't be disappointed. Your mind thinks independence equals control. But the reality is, extreme independence can quietly become emotional avoidance. There are two types of self-sufficient introverts. Type 1, secure. They enjoy solitude, but they can connect deeply. They choose independence, not out of fear, but strength. Type 2, defensive. They convince themselves they don't need anyone, but underneath, they fear vulnerability. Your brain loves isolation because isolation reduces risk. No expectations, no drama, no rejection. But growth doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in friction. It happens in vulnerability. Self-sufficient introverts are powerful because they think deeply. They observe patterns. Others miss. They are less impulsive. They don't crumble under social pressure. But if they never express themselves, they become invisible. And invisibility can turn into resentment. The key difference is this: healthy introversion equal to selective engagement. Defensive isolation equal to emotional withdrawal. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It only knows what feels safe. And safety feels like silence. But strength isn't silence. Strength is controlled expression. If that hit you good, it means you needed it. Here's the truth you've been avoiding. Being independent isn't the same as being evolved. Sometimes it's just being guarded. If you want to break this cycle, start with controlled vulnerability. Not oversharing, not changing your personality, just this: express one layer deeper than you normally would. If you usually stay silent, speak once. If you usually avoid asking for help, ask once. If you usually disappear, stay once. Here's the mental trick that actually works. Use solitude as recovery, not escape. Schedule alone time intentionally, but also schedule connection intentionally. Because true self-sufficiency means I can stand alone, but I'm not afraid to step forward. Build depth with a few people, not many. Speak less, but speak clearly. Let your silence be strength, not a shield. The world doesn't need you louder, it needs you intentional. The psychology of the self-sufficient introvert isn't about avoiding people, it's about mastering yourself. And once you master yourself, you don't need to dominate the room. Your presence changes it quietly,